Welcome to the Geek podcast, where it's an April blizzard. Here anyway, I'm Void, and I'm here with my co-host Beej.
It was 82 degrees today.
That is very different from where I am at the moment. Maybe spring will, spring one of these days for us. We'll see. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about Ready Player One because you were super excited about it, and I read the book multiple times, so I thought we could at least talk about it because I kind of want to know about the adaptation and some of that stuff. And I know you just wanted to talk about it, so it's a good topic.
Yeah, I just love it.
Yeah. And before we get into it, because we kind of had this conversation on in our Slack channel and on Twitter and a little bit on Reddit, the book itself is it's pretentious navel gazing, and I think that's kind of what we landed on. 100%, no question. It's totally aimed at our demographic, which is why we latched onto it. But you and I know it's not a good book by any objective measure. It's just it's total and utter fluff, and it just latched on. We latched on because it's aimed at our demographic, and I would even say that it's more so aimed at you than me, just because we're not that far apart in age. But I mean, it's definitely more for 70s and 80s kids, and I mean, I was born in the 80s, but I'm a 90s kid. Yeah,
and I mean, I was born in the early 80s, so a lot of the stuff in Ready Player One is right at some of it is right at my periphery, and a lot of it is where, this is stuff that I grew up with, where even the Atari stuff that was in the book really landed with me because adventure was my favorite game growing up. I used to spend hours and hours playing Robotron and Joust, and so those are major parts of it. Blade Runner, just all of the stuff that was in there, that really was a major part of my childhood. So I don't think it's a good book. I mean, in terms of good, if this is the kind of thing that's going to last through the ages, no, not at all. But it's one of my favorite books to read because it is fun. That more than any other book that I can really name, whenever I start this book, I just get happy. That's the way that this book makes me feel. So whenever I need something like that, and I was been looking forward to this movie, and I see so much hate out there for it, but I can't help but think that these are the kind of people who are so critical of the geek community that it's hard for them to find joy in this stuff. And that's what the book is. The book is just pure and utter, unadulterated joy about this stuff, which makes it navel-gazing. I mean, it is very self-aware of what it is, I think. And that's why I find it fun, because it doesn't try to be anything other than exactly what it is.
Well, and I see both sides of it because I'm close enough to the target demographic that I understand all of it, because I know of a lot of those things, but at the same time, I've never played an Atari. I've literally never played an Atari game. Well, not a game. I played a lot of Atari games, but I've never played an Atari. I never had one. It was before my time. And it's just a lot of the late 70s but then mostly 80s stuff that's referenced in the book just were things that I eventually watched when I was older, but I didn't grow up with them in the same way that you did. So it's kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, I want to get to the movie part. So I'm wondering, how true to the book was it? And I already listened to a few spoiler casts because that kind of thing doesn't bug me.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the adaptation was good, and I heard that they made a lot of great adjustments and changes. One of the things I'm really curious about is how they handled that extra life, because I felt that was somewhere where they could really just do whatever they wanted to. But yeah, I mean, tell me a little bit about the adaptation and how it went from movie to screen, or book to screen.
I was really going in, and I may have said it on here before, I'm not sure, but my lowest common denominator, the thing that, as long as it's better than Suicide Squad, it's at least succeeding on some level. And so I went in with only moderate expectations for it. I mean, honestly, I wasn't. The previews didn't really do anything for me, and so I was excited about it, but I wasn't just overwhelmed with excitement. So I was going in hoping for a tonal adaptation, that they would get the feeling of Ready Player One, as opposed to trying to do literal book to screen kind of adaptations. And that's really what it was. They changed so many things about this, that if you're going in looking for a literal adaptation of this, if you're looking to see them playing Joust against an Archlich, if you're looking for them to go through Dungeons and Dragons modules and recreate war games, that kind of thing is not going to happen because they changed all of the ways, like all of the gates and keys and everything like that. They've completely changed it. So like even the first gate, like you get into the movie 10 minutes in, you find out that the way that they get the first key, it's already been found and opened, and it's a giant race. That it's like a Twisted Metal meets Mario Kart race, trying to get there, and nobody has ever been able to beat it yet. And you have like King Kong and dinosaurs attacking things, like the Jurassic Park T-Rex is there, and King Kong is in it, and just stuff like that. The reason I think this works so much is because the references in the book will not translate to a mainstream audience on screen. That, just like you said, you're just a little bit aware, like you're just a little bit out of the target demographic. That think there was a 14-year-old girl in front of me who came, I went alone because Jennifer was sick, and I started talking to the people around me before the movie started, and there was a 14-year-old girl who her dad brought her because she was so excited because there was a video game movie. That's all they knew about it. And if it had been full of Joust and Robotron and Rush lyrics and Blade Runner and War Games, she wouldn't have been able to fully enjoy it. But the adaptations that they did and the references that they put in there were way more acceptable for mainstream audiences, stuff that they probably would have heard of and seen and were aware of, but were every bit as major cultural touchstones as any of the stuff in the book. Like there's an entire section on The Shining where they go into the Kubrick film, and just stuff like that that is fantastic in terms of tonal adaptation, but it is not even mentioned in the book.
Okay, cool. That's what I was hoping for. That's kind of what I thought they were going to do. They would just keep like the narrative skeleton and then hang all new sorts of like basically big set pieces on it.
And that's exactly what they did. And in terms of the extra life, I didn't know how they were going to do the extra life either, because it was so important. It was so such a major part of the book. I was like, they're not going to just let him play Pac-Man. Like there's no way.
That's how it happens in the book. Is like he when he's down, like he's just in a bad mood and he's wandering, he like finds a Pac-Man machine in like a pizza joint that's in one of the, whatever, it doesn't matter. He kind of finds it and he's just playing for a while absentmindedly, and when he gets to the kill screen, he gets an extra life. And I was like, there's no way they're going to do that for the movie.
No, not at all. What it was there is a really cool character called the Curator. They've changed like his Grail diary and all the research he's done toward the finding the Easter egg, and they've put a lot of what was it called? Anorak's Almanac, all the stuff that the Halliday left for the people to research. Yeah. He left it as basically a museum inside the Oasis this time, where you could walk in and watch any scenes from his he basically exported his memories into the computer.
That's a lot more visually interesting too.
It really is. And so there's a curator robot on there. And at one point, Wade goes and he's talking to him, and he's like, this is the only time that Kira is mentioned in the entire, everything that he left. That's the only time in the almanac that he did that. And the curator's like, it can't be. And Wade said, I'll bet you every bit of money on my character, or something like that. And the curator took it, looked through, and it was the only thing. And he was like, oh, you won. And he's like, so what do I win? And he flipped a quarter at him. And that was what he won for winning a bet with the curator of the Halliday Museum.
The quarter being the extra life.
The quarter being the extra life. So it was still a quarter that he put in his pocket, but he won it on a bet rather than having to beat Pac-Man.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that
with
totally
a perfect
works.
score.
So I have to ask, what were your favorite pop culture appearances in the movie?
Okay, I've seen so many people complain that Tracer was in it, but I cannot help, because of being an Overwatch player, that whenever and she didn't do anything. I don't think she ever talked or did anything at all. But there was just occasionally Tracer in the background doing something, and it made me giggle every single time, because I'm like, I love Tracer. And just, it was that, like, because it included references to current games, and all it was they're going through the main part of the Oasis, you're walking along a walkway, and there's all of the different games and areas that you can go to, and there's an Overwatch one, and it just happens to be that Tracer is outside doing stuff, zipping around, and then later on in the movie, like, she shows up just in different places in the Oasis. always like seeing that, and the fact that they replaced the Spider-Man Leopardon with the Iron Giant basically was awesome.
That's kind of what I figured from the trailers.
Well, H is actually making the Iron Giant. It's actually really cool. They made H this fantastic PvPer and a fantastic character, but they changed around the way that everything was organized, I guess, because there's basically a raid planet called Planet Doom or something like that, where they go after artifacts, and it's also PvP. Everybody can die, and H is really fantastic at that. And then they're also really good at building things and repairing stuff. So H is building an Iron Giant, and in the end, that's the kind of thing that's fighting like during the big battle at the end. They don't do the giant robot stuff, but they have Iron Giant, and they actually have Daito, which is strange. Daito turns into a Gundam at the end of it. He uses
okay. I can see that.
He has a thing where Gundam fights Mechagodzilla, and it was really awesome on that, because the Mechagodzilla that they did was so awesome that I want a Mechagodzilla movie now, because it was, I don't even know how to describe it. Like I love Godzilla. I love monster movies, and my wife doesn't understand why I love monster movies. It's almost like the Fast and the Furious movies. It's like, who are you? Why do you like this? But I love giant monster movies. I cannot wait to see the Rampage movie because it looks so dumb. The one with The Rock in it, just that kind of. That's why I love Pacific Rim. I love big dumb stuff like that, and it's. I have no idea why. So when I saw Mechagodzilla in there, he looked awesome. They did such a good job on that, fighting the Iron Giant and this Gundam coming in. And I thought it was just magnificent, them do it, the way that they tied all of that stuff together. And then one of my favorite reference in the entire book is at the very end, when he needs to fly, that Artemis has these magical black Chuck Taylors, that Converse All-Stars, and these Chucks. And I love Chucks. I have like 8 pairs of different colors of Chucks right now, and I've had to get rid of some, and they've just destroyed. Like, I love Chucks. And so I put on my black Chucks to be able to go watch Ready Player One. I was so excited. Like, obviously, I'm not the kind of person who dresses up for movies anymore, but whenever I'm going to see Ready Player One, of course I'm going to wear my black Chucks, and they completely cut it. That was a part that they ended up cutting, where during the final gate and the big war, that the Cataclysm only killed everybody on the planet instead of destroying everything in the sector. So the castle was still there. They didn't have to fly or do anything, so there was no need for the magical artifact Chucks. That made me really sad. I was really sad about that.
I don't know what a Madball's mummy is.
Okay, nobody does, and this is why I'm really happy about it. This is my favorite one in the movie, the favorite reference, because nobody probably remembers what Madballs are. One of my favorite toys as a kid was Madballs. And you may see them, sometimes they're called Crazy Balls, sometimes they're called Monster Balls, but if you look them up as Mad Balls and you Google Mad Balls mummy, it's a small rubber ball that is about the size, a little bit bigger than a baseball, and it's I don't even want to say it's a squeak toy, but it's kind of like that, like in the 80s, like a dog toy. I mean, honestly, it's like a little rubber plastic ball that you could bend and throw, and they're in the shape of monster heads. And I had so many of these, and I loved these things because I could like just play with these monster heads. And there were figures that you had that were not like those, but they had bodies, and like you could shoot their heads off at things, and it was just super cool. Like these monsters that did this, these Mad Balls. And so the movie uses one of these, and it's a very small reference, and it's a very small part of the movie, or a very small part of the scenery, I guess. Very small reference, where when they're destroying Mechagodzilla and they're getting Sorrento and blowing up where he is inside inside the cockpit, Artemis throws in a bomb into Mechagodzilla's cockpit, and it's the Madball's mummy, which was one of my favorite toys as a kid. And I cheered. Okay, I'm in the theater alone, first of all, on a Thursday night, being the nerdy white guy who comes into a theater about a video game movie. And I'm the guy who, when I see this Madball, like, I was like, yes, that is awesome! And I'm alone. And nobody else in the theater knew anything about it, made a sound at it, and so I'm like, nobody remembers these but me. But it was one of my favorite things, and the fact that that Spielberg included this this reference in the movie just made me. It really did make me happy, because it was pure nostalgia that most people, and a lot of people probably listening to this, will have no idea what it is.
That's okay. As long as you liked it, that's the main thing.
Yep, it made me so happy. That's exactly why I wanted to see this movie. That feeling of, oh my God, I loved that. And getting to see it used as something like that was just cool. It was just fun.
Well, and you said you saw it in 3D also, right?
Yes. I usually do Movie Pass these days. We have a Movie Pass membership so that we can go see some movies every month, and it'd be much cheaper. And you can't see 3D with Movie Pass. So there was an Atom Tickets, ATOM. I love this app way better than Fandango. And they had a thing where if you invited 3 people, they didn't have to buy it, but just so long as you sent the invite to 3 people, that you got a $5 ticket, no matter what, even for 3D. So I bought a $5 ticket for the 3D showing, and it was absolutely the right choice for me to make. Like, I don't like 3D. I don't like seeing 3D movies. That's why Movie Pass works so well for us. But I figured for a movie that takes place in virtual reality, 3D was the way to go with it, and it absolutely was. The visuals were really, really fantastic, and it didn't look like the 3D in post that you were talking about before, where everything's kind of like cardboard cutouts without any depth, and it just looks funny. This one looked really nice in 3D because of the way it was all CGI.
Cool. That's good. What else? So I know you have a bunch of other just kind of like scattered thoughts about the movie. Do you want to run through them really quick?
Yeah, I'll run through them. So one thing that Spielberg added to this movie that I thought was great, that had no place in the book, but it was a wonderful adaptive piece, was that in order to keep the rating down, like, this is a very violent movie. I mean, there's video game violence is violence, and there's a lot of people like cutting people's arms off and things like that because it's a game. And instead, they worked it into the movie that whenever someone is hurt, that instead of blood being spurting out, that their inventory, like their money, spurts out of them like blood, and other people can collect the money when they hurt them. And it's hilarious. First of all, it's a fantastic visual, and it's a way to keep the movie honestly kid-friendly while still being able to be violent and make it humorous at the same time, where it's not necessarily even violent, because they have a couple of really good sight gags with it as well. So, I mean, it's a way to show that they're doing stuff and how poor characters can get money by, like, following up on people as they're dying and grabbing their money and running away like scavengers. That would not have worked at all in the book because they could talk about going and grinding on kobolds. But in the movie, it was a great choice to be able to make something on the screen just work better, honestly. It was not a perfect movie by any means, though. I mean, the characterization and relationships were really rushed. There was just not time to be able to flesh out the characters and relationships like they needed to, because there are so many points in the story that you have to hit for any of it to make sense. So they kind of just did the perfunctory, okay, we're meeting, okay, we're falling in love, we're together, we're friends, and just kind of rushed through a lot of that. And the only part, and I was fine with it. I mean, it's a Spielberg movie. It's these two people falling in love on the internet. It's you know what's going on. But the fact that the movie and book are so themed around internet freedom and like freedom of information and data and access, that they didn't really get to go in on the idea of this huge corporation getting the real world implications and indenturement that they were talking about in the books. So like the huge company who is the bad guy, for those of you who haven't listened or read the book or seen the movie, the main company, the main bad guy is a company who wants to control the Oasis, basically the internet, and put ads all over it and start charging a monthly fee for access, whereas it's totally free for people to access as it is. And so the problem is that they are this multinational conglomerate. Once people get in debt, they basically put them under indentured servitude and basically remove their freedom for the rest of their life. But that all happens in the background, so it feels really trivialized. That, I mean, in the book, they're fighting to actually keep people from losing their lives and being imprisoned by a corporation, and this will only make it worse. But it was basically all about, charging for the internet. Like, these people didn't want to pay for a video game is kind of what it felt like in the movie. And it kind of took away that legitimacy of the fight that they were putting on. I mean, it's still a Spielberg movie. It feels like a Spielberg movie, but at the same time, he's trying new things, which I really appreciate. So I did like that part. But they did cut my favorite part of the movie, though, and I'm totally biased about it. I talked to Jennifer and one of my friends yesterday about it. I was like, I know I'm completely biased because Wade, the main character, was overweight at the beginning of the movie, and then later on at the beginning of the book, and then later on in the book, he basically became a shut-in and got so fat that he had to lock himself away from the internet and basically put a required amount of exercise to get in shape before he was allowed to get on the internet. And it was I'm biased on that because of my history in losing weight and being the sedentary guy, and then getting into to fitness and exercise before I would play any video games and stuff like that. So I expected a montage about that in the movie, but that didn't happen. Because I liked it. I thought it was good commentary in the book that, some of us may spend too much time sitting down, and
yeah, but not everything can make it over from the book.
No, and it can't. And that was one of the things, like, I knew it was going to get cut. Like, that was one of the most unimportant aspects of the story and characterization. But it was one of those, like, I used to be really fat and I wanted to see this fat guy save the world. That kind of thing. Sorrento, the main bad guy, was played by the same guy who played Orson Krennic in Rogue One. And he's just Krennic. Like, he's still despicable and he's awful and you hate watching him. But the entire time I was like, yep. I knew he felt really familiar and I couldn't really place why. And then I saw later on that it was Krennic and I was like, oh yeah, yep, he felt just like Krennic in Rogue One. Yep. Probably my last thing was just that they took and this is my nerdy nitpick on it, that they took a lot of liberties with the differences between virtual reality and augmented reality, where it had to be done because it was a film. Like, they had during the big fight scenes where everyone was charging at Anorak's castle and trying to fight for their freedom. Like, they had people on the streets in their VR helmets running down the street just like their characters were. And it's like, that's not what virtual reality is. Like, that's AR. That's not what they were doing. And but because it's a movie, seeing people charge down the street in order toward this conglomerate's offices makes for a much better visual than some people sitting around on the sidewalk punching at the air, trying to move around their character and being really intense. Like, that's not going to work in the movie. So it was just like, because I was watching, I'm like, they wouldn't be running like that if they were really doing this. And like, just seeing little weird things like that.
That's funny. But you liked it overall, right?
Oh, I did. I really liked it. I'm going to see it again. Like I said, Jennifer was sick when I went to see it, so I went and saw it alone. And she wants to see it, so I'm going to get to see it again soon-ish, whenever I can. But I did. I really liked it. And it's just like the book. It's not great cinema. It's not something that is going to be fantastic and long-lasting. But I think it's going to be about like Scott Pilgrim or one of those that we were talking about last time, where I'm going to buy this on DVD, and when I want something that is just fun, silly, and feel good, I'm going to throw it on and just have it playing in the background. Kind of like Iron Man 2 for some reason I do that with. It's like, yep, it's there. It's going. Where I like it.
Cool. Good. I need to see it at some point. Probably won't be in theaters just because that's hard, but I'll get around to it because like I definitely want to see this movie when it comes out. Cool, but no, I'm glad that you liked it. That bodes well for what I will think of it when I get around to it.
I really did. Like going not expecting. I mean, you like the book, so usually I tell people whenever they're asking about if they've read the book, I tell them, to temper their expectations because it's not fantastic if you're not the certain demographic for it. But for you, I think you'll have fun with it.
Probably, yeah. Okay, cool. Before we do Weekly Geekery, let's talk about the network just for a minute. Before I talk about all the shows, which obviously we love, but I want to say Capsule J just reached out. He's one of our awesome mods on Reddit, and he's very active on Twitter and everywhere else for the network. He is doing that anime poll, so he said that by the time this episode comes out, he's going to have that like group watch anime poll stickied at the top of the subreddit. So if you guys want to weigh in on what shows you are interested in like watching as a group for the season, go do that right now. He said that the poll is opening tonight, which when you guys are listening to it will be in the past. So it'll be there by the time you're listening. And then the results will be announced next Tuesday. And then he'll be having like a weekly discussion thread to talk about the most recent episodes of whatever wins first and second place. So get out there and let him know what you're interested in. I think it's awesome when our community is doing stuff like this. And then,
I love it.
Obviously, the other podcasts on the network, Geektitude with Ray and Joe is always fantastic. Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea. This week, they did their favorite Doctor Who episodes and kind of got in the weeds on it, which was really fun. The Comic Box this week, Rob did lots of comic news, which was kind of cool to catch up on. And then he started his MCU rewatch. So if you guys are doing that, I'm kind of thinking about doing that. It's really good to just kind of hear about everything again leading up to Infinity War. And then he's going to do a bunch of episodes leading up to Infinity War also. So that should be cool. With that, though, it's time for Weekly Geekery, where we share what we've been geeking out about this week. What do you have this week?
Well, on the MCU stuff, we bought Thor Ragnarok this week, and I'd not really cared much about going back and watching it. Like, it's not even that I dislike, because I really loved this movie in the theater, but I was just like, yeah, I've seen it. I'll watch it at some point. And Jennifer had really been wanting to see it again, so we went and bought it on Blu-ray. Which I have something to say about that as well. But we went and bought it on Blu-ray. We brought it home. And this movie is so much fun. I'd forgotten how much fun Thor Ragnarok is. That it is great. I cannot wait. I want to see all the special features now, which is why we bought the Blu-ray. And I'm really excited on how great that is. That it bodes really well for what's coming for Infinity War for that one. We decided to get Blu-ray instead of digital because I did some research on it. Like, when I bought the Pacific Rim Blu-ray and looked, I was like, this is way prettier than any of the HD stuff I've been streaming. That's crazy. And I went and just did some research on the differences in the resolution of streaming HD video versus Blu-ray HD. I didn't realize that even though they have the same resolution, that the streaming services have to compress them so much and lower the bit rate, and that ruins the color, and just so much of the sharpness is gone because of it not being on Blu-ray, that they have to stream it. So I was like, I'm going to start probably getting more Blu-rays than buying digital, just because of stuff like that I didn't even realize that it was that much of a difference because I very rarely watch Blu-rays. But it was a crazy difference. Like, have you noticed that whenever you're streaming versus if you actually have any physical stuff?
Of course. I mean, I did video encoding professionally as part of my job for years. Like, I get it.
That's fair. Because for me, not being really in that, I'm like, it's 1080p, it's fine. And then I finally looked into it. I'm like, holy cow, there's a big difference. And I was really astonished by that. And
cool. Well, you said like you finished a bunch of other stuff this week too, right?
I did. I finished The Collapsing Empire. It is so good, so good. I need more of it. I need it now, and he's probably not going to write it for a bit. So I'm really excited for the second one. You were absolutely right on recommending that one, and the audiobook is just great. Did you listen to it or did you read it?
I did a little of both.
Okay. It's so you know how good it is.
Yeah, it was good.
I started Lock-In after that, which is still awesome. Just have to listen to it. But it's still really good. So those of you who heard us last week talking about it, it is still awesome. You need to listen to it as well, by John Scalzi. We finished Jessica Jones season 1 last night. And so we're looking right now. We're trying to decide whether we want to watch The Defenders or if we want to move directly into Jessica Jones season 2. Because we haven't seen The Defenders yet. yet. So we figure that there's at least a little bit of character stuff that will go on in there. And since it's only 8 episodes, we may just watch it. But we haven't fully decided on that one yet.
There's not. You don't need to watch it. For Jessica Jones, there's like 0 character development at all.
Really?
Yeah.
What about Luke?
No, not really. Not really. There's, I mean, most of the character stuff in it is either Daredevil or Danny Rand. So it's very easy to skip the Defenders at this point.
That makes me so sad.
I know.
It makes me sad because I was looking forward to it and it turned out to not be good, is why it makes me sad. But that's something we're going to be getting into soon. I cannot wait to get into season 2 of Jessica Jones. The first season was still fantastic, but because we knew where it was going, it took a little bit away from it because there's so many twists and things that you don't expect the first time through. But it still gave us this really weird tension as we watched it that made us just really creeped out and scared and tense. So it was it's great. And as a palate cleanser, Jennifer found the show while I was watching Ready Player One, discovered the show Crazy Ex-Girlfriend. You will hate this, Void.
Yeah,
Do not watch it.
No, I know. I've heard about it.
Okay, because I love it. That Jennifer and I, this is exactly the kind of dumb TV that we love. And she said that she had heard a lot of people talking about it who didn't necessarily like the kind of shows that we thought that it was. So when they started talking about this one, she decided to watch it while I was gone. And then I started up from where she was. And it's like this, it feels like The Good Place, except it's like an hour long musical episode, and it's weird. It honestly, and this is gonna sound like a really strange analogy, it feels like a mix between Drop Dead Diva and The Good Place. Yep, and that's it. I mean, that's it. It's great. It's fun, and apparently in the later seasons, and like this woman is nuts. I mean, the main character is unhinged and makes really bad life decisions, and apparently in the later seasons of it, they actually start to deal with real mental health issues because this woman is she is crazy, and and they talk a lot even beginning that like that's a catch-all term for a lot of different things that it shouldn't be, but they deal with real mental health stuff later on, which I'm excited to see them touch on that on, I think it's a CW show, so it's really cool. I like it. You will hate it, but I'm glad to have found something that is exactly within that tonal range of TV that I like. That's not quite a sitcom. And speaking of finishing, I did finish my half marathon taper. I completed the Star Wars Dark Side virtual half marathon. I ran 13 and a quarter miles this weekend, so now it is my taper down to the races in a couple of weeks. So I am taking it easy. I have not injured myself yet, and just getting ready to do it. So I'm really proud of myself because I realized that I went and did it on Saturday because it was the last day of March. I ran more in March of this year than I did all of 2017, and then I have ran and I've run already this entire year more than I've run in the last 2 years combined.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So it's like I'm really happy about myself right now. I'm honestly proud of myself, and I'm humble bragging on my podcast because I'm so proud of myself.
Well, good job. I'm really excited to hear about how the races themselves go. That'll be really cool.
I think it's going to be awesome. And Rose is doing it as well. Capsule J's wife, Rose262, is doing it. So she's going to be at the Star Wars half marathon running it. So she'll destroy me.
Okay.
In terms of time.
That's fair. I did a bunch this week. A lot of it, I don't know, I'll just dive in. So I played more Fortnite. I'm not going to dwell on it, but I did have one really interesting second place pacifist finish. So like I did an entire, and I was just playing around. I was just goofing around. I was like, I'm going to try and see how far I can get if I don't pick up any building materials and don't pick up any weapons for an entire round. And I got second place, and I almost won. I got really close to winning.
How do you win if you don't do weapons?
I got the circle so small that there wasn't really anywhere to hide except for like 1 or 2 places. and the guy had built a giant tower straight up. So I ran out and I tried to destroy the tower out from under him so he would fall and take falling damage. And I was like one or two pickaxe swings away from accomplishing that before he figured it out and like escaped without getting injured.
Man.
And then I died instantly. But anyway, that was really fun as like a self-imposed challenge this week. I also finished Altered Carbon, and my thoughts are kind of what they were last week. Like, I still think it has way more sex and violence than it actually needs to make the point that they were trying to make with the setting. Like, I get your argument, but I still think they went so far beyond what they needed to do. And it just felt like, oh, I'm on Netflix. Like, how much can I get away with type of thing, which is super annoying.
I can see that.
The one thing that I really liked was there's an episode, it's like episode 7 or 8, I don't know. But because of a plot conceit, there's basically a flashback episode. And it goes back to Takeshi when he's in his original sleeve. So again, Altered Carbon, they can like put their mind in different bodies, and like just because a body dies doesn't mean the person dies. So the whole series, he's in like, the main character is just like a white guy. He's like a tall, generic, like fit white guy. And he goes back to his original sleeve, which is like an Asian character. And that Asian actor is so much better as Takeshi than the main character of this entire season ever was. And it ruined the rest of the season for me because I hated going back to the white actor after that.
Really?
Yeah. I was just like, wow, he is just not nearly as good as the Asian actor. So I wish that they had been reversed. I think that wouldn't have worked for the...
Well, that's impossible.
I know, for the plot reasons. But still, that's... And I don't know.
I've seen a lot of people complaining about it. I've seen a lot of people complaining about it because there's a white dude playing a Japanese guy, and they couldn't have done it any differently than that because of the story that's being told. So I'm really glad that they actually brought in the Takashi from the past and had the actor continually play him throughout and gave that full episode of it, because you're right, he's fantastic. And I'm really hoping that we get a lot more in the next season. But I actually really liked the guy who played him in the present with the big white dude, because he was so much like the audiobook narrator, which was why it was almost identical to the idea and the voice of the narrator that was in there, that it just felt exactly right for me. That it hit exactly that tonal thing that I wanted. So no matter what, it sounded like the actor sounded exactly like I needed him to for my head. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm all in. Like, I just bought in immediately because of that.
I totally disagree. I think they could have easily had an Asian actor with like a different sleeve than his original one, and it would have been totally fine. Like,
that's true.
The guy they got as the main character was so generic and like bland in comparison that it once I saw a different take on the same character of Takeshi, to go back to the main character take for the whole season, I was just disappointed. So that's the only thing that I was kind of like, But I mean, overall, I really liked it. I would definitely watch another season of it. I would hope they would tone back the sex and violence, but they probably wouldn't.
And at least in season 2, we know that he is in a different sleeve.
Yeah, it'll be a different actor.
By the nature of the show and because of the second book and how they, where it takes place, it's going to be a different actor. So hopefully they'll at least rectify that for you in terms of having a different person. Hopefully he's better for you and than the one is now.
Well, it would be cool if they kept going with it, because just like Doctor Who, how the Doctor always switches, like they could legitimately have a different main actor for the main character and have the same character season after season, which could be pretty cool.
It would be really awesome if they did that.
Yeah. The Westworld season 2 trailer came out, like the last one before the season actually kicks off, and I'm really psyched for that. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts except I'm excited, and I'll probably pay for HBO again for a little bit to watch it. I started Persona 3 the animation because I didn't really realize that like Persona 3, 4, and 5 all have animations, like full, I don't know if they're movies technically, they're like really long, like 90 minutes worth of anime basically, but it follows the story of it, and there are multiple ones. They're not episodes, it's almost like having like a bunch of really long movies that all tie together into the story. So I am probably never going to finish Persona 3. I tried a couple different versions, and all of the versions out there that people are like, oh, these are the ones you want to play, they're not on convenient platforms for me anymore. And the ones that I can get to easily are the bad versions that I've already bounced off of a couple times. So I saw people talking about the animations because Persona 5 animation is coming out or just came out or something like that. And it reminded me that Persona 3, the animation existed. So I went back and I started that. I don't know if I'm going to go through the whole thing, but at least I want some context just because I never played through Persona 3.
And I remember seeing Persona 3, but like I don't know anything about it. What was it that made you bounce off of it as much as you liked 4 and 5?
Well, the only version that I really had access to was the one that's like the PSP version that you can play on the Vita. And what I didn't realize when I tried to get into it and I failed is that it's actually a demake of the game. Like, it has some of the core stuff, but they stripped out a bunch of story, a bunch of cutscenes. They stripped out all of the actual wandering in the world and having time between, like, plot points, which is one of my favorite things about Persona is just being in the world. They got rid of all that. Like, you don't have a character that walks around. You have menus that you navigate, and you can just jump straight to people. It's really awkward and weird. So, yeah, one of my friends described it as a demake, and I was like, oh, yeah, that makes a lot more sense about why I didn't like that one.
Oh no! I just want to tell you. Okay, so I downloaded Persona 4 today, and I reinstalled it on my Vita, and it turns out that my save data is gone. I just opened it up as you were talking about that, and I was like, oh, I need to make sure that installed. So I just opened up my Vita right beside me and went to install it, and as it loaded up, my save data is gone. So that's fun. I don't remember how many hours, like 10 hours into it, maybe. And now that's sad time.
You might be able to pull it down off of PSN, maybe. You might have to play with that after.
Yeah, but man, sad times.
Yeah. I was also watching The Last Jedi. Like, I rewatched The Last Jedi, and at the same time, I'm listening to the audiobook because I always do the novelization to get a little bit more context on the story. And I'm almost done. I'm in the last, like, hour of the audiobook. It was interesting. So a couple things I wanted to pull out that I already told you some of these, but things that like I just didn't get from the movie that I think are really worth mentioning that it just didn't do a good job. Like, they weren't key points to the plot, but I thought they were interesting. So when Luke is on the island, he actually shut himself off from the Force completely. And I didn't get that from the movie. Like, I knew he had like withdrawn to like hide his presence, but I didn't understand, like, in the book, it makes very clear that, like, he hasn't touched the Force at all. He completely cut himself off from it years ago,
I got that from the movie. Okay. That was something that I, at least the way that they talked about it, that's what I was going with.
Well, and, like, that's one of the reasons that, like, the light is able to come back in such force through Rey, because Luke hasn't been in contact with the Force at all. And when he reaches out to Leia, that's the first time that he really goes deep into the Force. Well, I knew that was the first time he really, like, went deep into the Force. I got that from watching the movie. I didn't realize that was the first time he had touched the Force in years and years and years. So
I got you.
That was interesting. You know, Rey, they kind of touch on it in episode 7, but she's like a Force prodigy. And again, it kind of makes more sense knowing that Luke had cut himself off and like Snoke and Kylo were like rising with the dark side and the light has to meet it. And they give a lot more context and explanation about like how the light and the dark have to stay balanced, which is why she came kind of out of nowhere with such force. And the other thing is that she picked up a bunch of her Force powers and training because when Snoke puts her mind in contact with Kylo's mind, she picks up a lot of his skills and abilities from that.
Huh. Okay.
And it's just something that's like, how would you show that in a movie? They just didn't, you know?
Yeah. I mean, that's not something that even you can explain very well. Unless the conceit of the movie is like The Matrix, where you download the stuff into your brain. Like, that's not even something they could talk about well.
Yeah, and then Snap Wexley is alive somewhere, which I know you care about, so I told you about that one. And he's one of the characters that's kind of in The Force Awakens, but really he's an extended universe character that Beej cares about. But he was on a mission during The Last Jedi. He's off somewhere doing something else, so he's not dead. Don't worry, Beej.
Yep, I'm glad.
Yeah, I know you're glad. And then the gold dice, which it felt really out of place the first time watching that movie, like they were important. Those are the dice that Han Solo used to win the Millennium Falcon. And I am 100% sure those are going to show up in the Solo movie here in about a month. And I bet that they put those in because these films were in production at the same time. So they were talking to each other. Like, the story teams were talking to each other, and they're like, hey, if you include this in The Last Jedi, it'll have a lot more meaning after Solo comes out. So
that's true.
I'm 100% sure those will show up. Otherwise, it just, I don't know, it felt kind of out of place and weird the way that they treated those in the movie. But now that I know where they came from, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, it was something in the movie that I just didn't understand why they kept focusing on them, because it was something that none of the other movies or books had ever talked about to my knowledge. They were just kind of, okay, these are important. Now let me give you this holographic version of these dice. I didn't get it.
Yeah, and even in the book, even in the Last Jedi novelization anyway, it's like one sentence throwaway line about how those were the dice that he used to win the Millennium Falcon. So that must be a big part of the story in Solo. Yeah,
I hope so.
I would think so at this point. The other thing that I'm like halfway through a book this week, and I've basically been doing nothing else since I started playing this book, reading this book.
Not audiobook, but actually reading it, though.
Yeah, no, I'm reading it. It's the most interesting nonfiction book that I've read in years and years. It's called The Big Picture, The Fight for the Future of Movies, which is a really dumb and non-explainative. It doesn't really explain what the book is. I don't like that title at all. Anyway, it's by Ben Fritz, who's a journalist that I like, and I follow him. I like his writing about movies because that's kind of what he's been following for a really long time. And this is his first book, and he talks about how what he wanted to do for a really long time was talk about how movies got to where they are right now. But to do that, you have to have a bunch of concrete examples from recent history. And to do that part of it, you have to be embedded at a studio with like all access behind the scenes for like a couple years. So he had this idea for a book, and he's like, well, I'm never going to be able to do this. None of the studios are ever going to give me carte blanche to just do whatever for a couple years. Yeah. And then that Sony email leak happened a couple years ago. And he had to report on it, because it was a really big thing for like 2 months. And then the news cycle happens to everybody, and it just kind of falls out of favor. But there were tens of thousands of emails sitting there from just years and years of Sony, and no one was really reading through them because there was so much content. So he read through every single email from that leak and used that to basically embed himself in Sony retroactively. And that is where he kind of starts the book, is he walks through the last, 10 years of Sony and what was happening when and why. And it is so fascinating. So he talks a lot about, and again, I'm halfway through the book. I haven't gotten to all the modern stuff that I'm really super interested in, but he did kind of like lay out what he's going to talk about right at the beginning of the book. So the part that I'm through anyway, he talks about like the 90s to the early 2000s, and then kind of is starting to touch on modern day, but about how in the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of films were star vehicle films where it was just like one actor or actress, and that would be the entire premise of the film, right?
Yes.
And there were lots of movies for lots of people. And one of the reasons for that is because DVD sales were so huge that if they made lots of movies that would appeal to everybody in different niches, they would just sell tons of DVDs. Because the movie studios would sell DVDs at wholesale cost, which is about like $18 a pop. And if you guys don't know, wholesale is usually half of MSRP, which is the suggested retail price. So DVDs technically were supposed to cost, $36? But all of us know for years and years at Best Buys and Targets and Walmarts and whatever's of the world, they would just have so many displays of DVDs, and it would be like, get 5 for $3, or like, you know what I mean? They'd be like, pick 3 for 10. So all of the big box stores were selling DVDs at a loss to get people in the door because retail has been struggling for a long time. And they still pay wholesale cost to the movie studios. So they are selling a ton of them, and they are losing money on it, but the movie studios get the full amount that they're supposed to get for it. So DVDs were just like raking in money. So that was their plan, was to just put out tons and tons of movies. But then technology kept evolving, and we got streaming, and we got Netflix. Right. And suddenly, like, all of these movies in theaters and DVDs no longer appealed the same way because we can just stay home and like watch a streaming version of a TV show or whatever.
Yes.
So that started happening, and DVDs ate into their profits. But then the other thing that really swung stuff in the last 10 years here is that dramas moved to TVs because of foreign box offices. And I know we've talked a little bit about like the Chinese box office on the show before and how it's becoming more of a dominant force in Hollywood's mind. Well, it's not just Chinese, it's the South American box office, the Asian box office in general, even though that's a very broad net to cast. And then still the Chinese one is the biggest part of it. And they didn't exist 15 years ago. Like, those have emerged in the last 10 or 15 years because those markets didn't have a true middle class until 10 or 15 years ago. So what happened was as these middle classes were emerging, and they were just starting to get like our movies basically in theaters, and they would go see them for real instead of like pirated copies third hand or whatever. The only things they were really getting that Hollywood would put the effort into moving over there were these big bombastic blockbuster like AAA movies, right? So the entire time that movies have existed locally for them in theaters, all they got were blockbusters. And
oh, wow.
So over time, they see movies at the movie theater. The only thing that's worth it to them is to see a blockbuster movie because that's all they've ever had. And all of these like dramas that are American dramas that are just people like talking heads for 2 hours, that doesn't appeal to them at all because it never existed in cinema for them. It's not like us with our like 100 years of history at this point in movies.
Right.
And so they can't sell those, which means that if you're going to make one of those now, you're only going to get the domestic box office. And if you're only getting the domestic box office, it's a horrible business decision. And
you're not making any money on it generally with marketing and branding and any of the other budget costs that you have.
Right. So the knock-on effect of all that is that now we get less films, but they're more predictable, right? And they're more big budget, they're more blockbuster, they're tentpole films or they're franchise films that people know what they're getting in for, because part of it is those foreign box offices, but then the other part is that like we have so many more choices at home now that if we don't know exactly what we're getting, we're probably not going to pay the money to go to the theater because tickets are expensive, popcorn's expensive, like finding a babysitter and scheduling, for like me, that is hard to do. So all of those things mean that the ticket prices are going up and the amount of people in theaters is going down over time. So it's just this really interesting conglomeration of events, basically. And where I left off last night when I stopped reading was really getting into the Marvel movies and how they came up with the first cinematic universe and how they got to that point and then got acquired by everything they got acquired by. But yeah, it's just super fascinating. Like the movies are always interesting to me, but I didn't realize how much I found that industry interesting until I read this book. And like I said, this is probably the most interested I've been in a nonfiction book in I don't even know how many years.
That one sounds really awesome. While you were talking, I went and looked to see if it was on Audible because that's the kind of thing I would like to listen to, and it's not there. So I will have to look into like reading that. That sounds fantastic in so many ways that it hits on like the same kind of nonfiction that I love as well. I would, man, that sounds great.
Yeah, so if you guys are interested, again, because the title is so generic, it is The Big Picture, the fight for the future of movies. I cannot remember. I just looked at it again on the notes because I literally can't remember the name of the book, even though I've been reading it for days now. I'll probably have more thoughts next week just because it's so fascinating. It's so fascinating. The only other thing I've really been doing this week, which is kind of surprising to me, is that I'm playing Stardew Valley again. I'm totally skipping the social part of it because I did that in my first like manic like 30 or 40 hour playthrough. I'm just in it for the systems this time, but I'm playing casually, which is, well, you know me. I don't really play games casually. I'm either like all in the game or I'm done with the game. I don't have much of an in-between. And Stardew Valley, I've been playing like almost every night this week, and I'll just boot it up and play a couple days in-game right before bed at night, and then I'll put it down. It's strange for me to be like casually playing a game, which is why I wanted to bring it up, because I don't do this.
And I don't understand going back to that one in particular, because I can't that one's hard for me to actually see the appeal in. A lot of them I see the appeal. This one feels very monotonous to me.
Well, I mean, maybe that's part of the appeal, is that it's casual. Like, there's nothing you have to do in a given day. There's no like driving goal you have to get to. I just like do a couple days of farming and like maybe fishing and maybe going to the cave. And then I'm like, okay, cool. And then I'm done for the night and I go to bed.
Okay.
And yeah, I don't know. It's relaxing. It's strangely relaxing. It's also still a really good podcast game. So I'll kind of like throw in a podcast in one headphone and listen to this with the other ear. And yeah, it's been really nice.
Yeah, I can see that. I've actually downloaded. I'm trying to get back into JRPGs, and I've been wanting to play one lately, but I don't really want to spend a lot of hardcore time sitting and doing it. So I've downloaded Final Fantasy IV again on my phone to be able to see how the Android port has done. So we'll see.
Okay, cool. Well, that's probably it for this week. You can write to us with comments, suggestions, or feedback. The email address is geek2geekcast@gmail.com, or reach us on Twitter @geek2geekcast. We also have longer discussion threads on the subreddit at reddit.com/r/geek2geekcast.
And if you want to talk to us, just chat with us. We're on Slack too. Go to slack.geek2geekcast.com for an invite. And remember, we're also part of a podcast network like we talked about earlier. So head over to geek2geekcast.com to see all of our shows.
I blog at agreenmushroom.com, and you can find me at grnmushroom. That's green mushroom without the E's on Twitter.
And I'm on Twitter as @Professor Beej. That's Beej with 2 E's. And I'm online at runningshoes.tv.
We've been Void and Beej with your Geek to Geek podcast. That'll do it for this week. See you next week, geeks.
Bye, geeks. Don't die in a blizzard.
Comics. Hey everyone, Rob here, your friendly neighborhood comic geek, inviting you to join me and my rotating cast of co-hosts each week on The Comic Box, where we tell you everything you need to know to become a world-class comic book geek. So join us for The Comic Box each week right here on the Geek to Geek Podcast Network.
Hi everyone, I'm Katie.
And I'm Chelsea, and we are the hosts of Tea Time with Katie and Chelsea. We are two best friends who love pop culture and talking about pretty much whatever we want. Katie!
Yes?
Stop thinking about Zac Efron and tell our future listeners what some of our latest episodes have been about.
Well, we've talked about Zac Efron.
No, get it together, Katie.
Fine. We've talked about fan fiction, classical literature adaptations, favorite TV couples, and so much more. So grab your cup of tea or whatever your drink of choice is and download our podcast today.
Hi, my name is Joe Hogan, and I'm a geek. And if you're currently listening to this, there's a good chance you're a geek too. So check out my podcast, Geektitude. Each week, I talk with somebody about their geek aptitude. Sometimes I talk to people in a geeky profession. Sometimes it's someone doing something really cool with their geekiness. Often it's another geeky podcaster. But it's always someone who wants to share their inner geek. So join me each week as we come together to geek out about all the geeky stuff we love. And remember, this week, keep it geek.